couple of more morel mushrooms. They were covered. They had covered the whole. They were covering the whole side of that hillside. And then there was another joining hill full of morels. So I really did have a good foraging day that day. And I kind of thought of Ron, you know. But harvesting morel mushrooms, it's the way you want to do it is bring along a knife or a pair of scissors, and you go down to ground level and you clip the base of the mushroom. And when you do that, you turn it up and you'll see that the entire structure of that mushroom is hollow, except that's where the spores are. So what you want to do is you just shake the mushroom and the spores come out, and then you help replenish them for next year. Morels are wonderful. They're quite tasty. Chefs just love morels. The only mushroom that really looks like a morel, and by the way, when you see them, they look like pine cones turned up to the sky. That's how distinctive they are. But the only other mushroom that looks like a morel is called a false morel. And false morels only grow in September. And if you find what you think is a morel, it's not. And false morels are close to deadly poisonous. And yeah, you want to really stay away from them. I know a lot of these plants grow in the forest, but there are a few that grow actually in your own backyard and front yard. This is a real number here. This is one of my favorite plants, full grown. It looks like one of those Japanese monsters in those movies, you know, that walk slow and finally get the girl. This plant you've probably run across when you're weeding your garden, and you get a sting and a rash, and oh my God, what was that? You know, you thought you were stung by a hornet, but no, it's the stinging nettle. And you're kind of wondering, well, why would you want to eat something that stings, you know? But there is an enzyme in that plant, like the fiddleheads, that once you take that plant and boil it, the stinging obviously goes away, and there is a wondrous fragrance and taste to this plant that suddenly evolves. The way you want to harvest them, obviously, is to wear protective clothing, long pants, long sleeve shirts, and gloves. And you don't rip up the plant. What you do is you just grab it. Once you put your gloves on, you grab it, and then you rip the top of it off. And it leaves. You take them home. As I said, you boil them. Once they're boiled, you let them dry a little bit. And there are all sorts of recipes that you can do with this lovely flavored plant. One which is an incredible recipe is the Swedes have a lovely recipe for nettle soup, and that's included in the recipes that I've left here. Another plant that you would find in your garden, it's a softer, more gentler plant than the stinging nettle monster here. It's called lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters will also grow in abandoned construction sites. They'll grow anywhere. And this plant is basically characterized as a weed by gardeners, and you've probably seen it growing in your backyard. The way you can tell that it's lamb's quarters also has another name. It's called goosefoot. And the leaves of the lamb's quarter plant actually are shaped like goose feet or pads. And the other way that you can verify that is a plant, that it is the lamb's quarters, is you flip over the leaves, and there's a light powder on the other side. You can take it and rub it with your finger. That's unique with that plant. You can eat that plant cooked or raw. It's wonderful in salads. About a week and a half ago, I made hamburgers, and I diced up some leaves from lamb's quarters, and I put it in with the hamburgers, and the taste was amazing. It was really quite good. And again, you don't want to rip up that plant. You only take the leaves, and you don't want to take all the leaves. as that plant matures towards the end of summer, it develops flowers, and then those flowers develop seeds. And you just don't touch those flowers or seeds. The seeds come down, and then the plant flourishes. So another very tasty weed. One winter, I was, I guess it was a couple of winters back, I was snowshoeing, and it was late February. The afternoon sun was getting warm, and I was on the Avon Trail, and I decided to go off trail. And when I did, I went what I figured out was a bog. And the February sun had started melting the snow, so there were multiple little streams cutting through the snow. And as I traversed one of them, I looked down, and there were little green plants, perfectly. And as I looked down closer, I realized it was watercress, and they were everywhere, but they were very tiny. So what I did was I made a mental note of that area, and made myself a mental note of that area, and would go back the following June, maybe in July, when the plants really started to flourish, because I figured they would just dominate that area. Well, I wasn't disappointed. They were everywhere. There was nothing but, in July, there was nothing but watercress plants. I want to back up a little bit. A couple of months back, there was a story out of Italy. I don't know if you read it, but there were, I think up to 20 Italians died collecting mushrooms. Now, they didn't die from eating the wrong mushroom. They died from the elements. They fell through crevices, fell off cliffs. Probably they didn't have the right equipment. Probably they didn't know the terrain. What I'm trying to say is, when you go out foraging, in the woods or in fields, anything could happen. So now I'm back to that bog that I went to. And I'm for the kill, for the plants. And the more I go in, the more plants. Trouble is, the more plants, the more deer flies, the more mosquitoes. So I got deer flies eating off my neck and arms. I got mosquitoes eating off my legs and ankles. I'm picking watercress, and I stopped for a moment to try to figure out where I was on the food chain. About 12 feet ahead of me, I could see something that I couldn't believe. It was the mother of all watercress plants. That thing could be classified as a bush. So as a forager, when you pick watercress, you only take the top. Now watercress is a special plant. Its root system runs beneath the water. So if you rip up that plant's gone forever. So what we do is we just take the top flowers, or I'm sorry, the leaves of all these stems, these multiple stems that come up from the plant. So for a forager, that really takes a while. It's wonderful eating wild, but wild watercress. But it does take a while to pick these off one at a time. So I'm thinking, that's a heck of a plant. I could harvest about 3 pounds of watercress in under a half an hour. So if you've been in a lake in Ontario and you step down, you get that sucking sound or that feeling with your feet. Well, it didn't bother me. I was headed. I just had one thing in mind. I was headed for that plant. I also didn't take into account that there were no rocks in the area, so something is amiss here. Closer and closer to the plant, my feet start sinking in more and more. And I take one step, kind of stumbled. My second step followed, and I'm going down. I mean, I'm really going down. I'm up to my knees in muck, then my waist. I'm up to my chest, and I got to figure out how to do my best Indiana Jones thing to get out of there. Well, I did grab onto a dead tree, and it did break. So I'm up to here, really panicking this time. But I reached out and did find a live tree, hauled myself out. No one could see my heroics. Anyway, I didn't look too good anyway. I was just caked with mud. The plant's still sitting there, and I understand why it's so lush, because it's covered by a moat of muck. Had I sunk down in there, I would have probably kept company with several deer carcasses, a couple of unfortunate raccoons, and maybe 1 or 2 hikers. There was no bottom at all to that pit. It was really something else. So I survived anyway. Mushrooms. The mushrooms I've chosen in these photographs are mushrooms that are distinctive. Someone once said there are bold mushroom hunters and there are old mushroom hunters, but there ain't no old, bold mushroom hunters. You have to be really careful what you're picking. So what I've done is mushrooms that you can really, there's really no doubt as to what they are. They're distinctive from any other mushrooms close to them. Now, these mushrooms, oyster mushrooms grow throughout most of the foraging season. They're kind of tricky because they tend to grow after a rain, so if you want to harvest, you have to be there after a rain to harvest them. They're wonderful tasting mushrooms. If you can find them on, you usually find them on very dead logs. What I mean by very dead is, you know, those logs that have fallen, they're black and they're about ready to turn to rich dirt. Well, these mushrooms love that type of terrain, and they'll cover a whole log. I found about 5 pounds of freshly grown. The other mushroom that's in the same family is a smaller variety, and it's called the angel wing mushrooms. Again, these are mushrooms, you know what they are. There aren't poisonous mushrooms that look like these. They look like miniature oyster mushrooms. The oyster mushrooms, by the way, can grow about that size, whereas the angel wing mushrooms are a lot smaller variety. They grow, both of these grow throughout all these woods here. I've also found them over at T.J. Dolan Park as well. But the angel mushrooms are also quite good, not as tasty as the oyster mushrooms, but they are quite good, a lot smaller, very flimsy. The only disadvantage with them is they only last a day. After that, they start turning gray, and when that happens, they start losing their flavor. And, you know, you get a lot of bugs in them too. So, but they are quite good. Oyster mushrooms, by the way, I've sauteed in garlic and olive oil, and they are just wonderful. Again, the recipes that I feature here also include several recipes for oyster mushrooms.
Do they grow on coniferous logs, or is it
yes.
Coniferous is okay?
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Okay.
I've tasted it on both, yeah.